Welcome to Roll for Insight, the D&D podcast where we dive into the game, the lore, and the internet's favorite arguments. Grab your dice and your character sheet, and let's roll for insight. Hello, welcome to Roll for Insight. In this episode, we're going to be talking about the Minor Illusion spell of the 2024 D&D Player's Handbook. So Minor Illusion is an illusion cantrip for the Bard, Sorcerer, Wizard, and Warlock classes. This is a super popular and versatile spell when you put your imagination to good use. However, some people are not fans of illusion spells, and we will go through some reasons why. So in this episode, we will be covering the description of the spell from the Player's Handbook. We'll review some gameplay uses and examples you can bring to your table for how to use the spell. We'll go over some of the controversies around using illusion spells at the table. And last, we'll end with some fun fact information about the spell itself. Okay, first topic, spell details. So this is an illusion cantrip for the Bard, Sorcerer, Warlock, and Wizard classes. It's got a casting time of 1 action, a range of 30 feet. The components are somatic and material. The material is a bit of fleece, and the duration is 1 minute. You create a sound or an image of an object within range that lasts for the duration. The illusion ends if you cast this spell again. If a creature takes a study action to examine the sound or image, the creature can determine that it is an illusion with a successful intelligence or investigation check against your spell save DC. If a creature discerns the illusion for what it is, the illusion becomes faint to the creature. Now, a few clarifications on the description. You can create either a sound or an image, not both with the same casting, because this is a feature available to illusionist wizards. The study action it talks about, which is an intelligence check, it uses your action to study or observe something, and that can be arcana, history, in this case investigation, nature, or religion. Now for sound, if you create a sound, its volume can range from a whisper to a scream. It could be your voice, someone else's voice, a lion's roar, a beating of drums, or any other sound you choose. The sound continues unabated throughout the duration, or you can make discrete sounds at different times before the spell ends. For the image, if you create an image of an object, such as a chair, muddy footprints, or a small chest, it must be no larger than a 5-foot cube. The image can't create sound, light, smell, or any other sensory effect. Physical interaction with the image reveals it to be an illusion, since things can pass through it. Now let's talk some gameplay uses here, because this is a great spell with a whole lot of utility. We're talking combat, stealth, social interactions. A lot of the limitations come from either your imagination or the DM's discretion. So let's talk about some combat and stealth uses. A popular use for the spell is to create distractions or misdirection with either a sight or sound. So, some examples of sounds. You could do whispering or a scream or shouting, which can get guards to go running, or the reverse. The sound of an approaching city guard unit can get bandits to turn and run away from your party. You can lure people into an ambush by getting someone to leave their post, or the sounds of a snarling beast can make villagers shut their doors and stay inside. Using sight, you can create the sight of a dead body covered in disease, which can prevent people from approaching, regardless if they're an enemy or not. If you don't want common folks coming through a tunnel, you can have a simple collapsed hallway sign or a collapsed tunnel sign hanging to make it look like the area is maybe under construction. If you get creative, you can use it offensively and defensively. You can deter people from areas with illusions of bloodstains, traps, like a large ballista pointing down a hallway, or a pit trap in the floor. If you have multiple people in your party who can cast this spell, you can also increase the area of effect. It's also a good idea to create things that people don't naturally want to touch, so that they're less likely to inspect it to see if it's an illusion. So things like creating acid surfaces, or spider webs, or creating something out of reach that they can't touch. Sounds can also be particularly effective, so if you're crossing an icy river, make it look like there's cracks in an area of thin ice to deter people from following. The sound of cracking ice can also be very terrifying if you're already out on the ice. Now, one of the uses that typically can be more up to the DM discretion is using an illusion to provide cover to hide. So 5 feet of an illusionary wall or a boulder can help in a fight. You can also create other objects like fake doors, crates, barrels. You can cover up doorways to delay someone chasing you. Keeping in mind 5 feet isn't necessarily large enough to cover a door, but you could drag a chest in front of the bottom part of the door and create an illusion covering the top. But that's also DM dependent because a 5-foot cube, as the spell description states, it can be tipped on its edge to get closer to 7 feet tall. Some DMs may say it must fit in the 5x5x5 cube flatly though, so again, DM discretion on what you can do with the spell. Other ideas include making a pit trap look like solid ground, or the reverse, solid ground looking like a pit trap. A lot of these ideas can either delay or stop an enemy from giving chase. Now, if you find yourself in a foot chase, you can also misdirect by creating footprints leading one way while you go another. Or you could also potentially cover up your own tracks temporarily by making the ground look like a smooth surface. You may also be able to imitate some limited spell effects with the illusion, because some spells alter the environment, so keeping in mind the stationary limitations of the spell, it's a static image, it cannot change, plus the dimensions are extremely limited. But some ideas would be darkness, vine growth in a hallway, maybe a web spell, keeping in mind it is an illusion. Now, there's also a lot of great social and utility uses for minor illusion. So here's some ideas. You can use the spell to communicate silently between your party. Because there's no verbal components to the spell, it might be limited because it would be a one-way communication, so it's not like the message spell. But you could also consider using some simple animal noises, which would mean various warnings for your party. So for example, a bird call could mean someone's approaching. Maybe a cat's meow could mean it's all clear. The animals might also depend on your location, because an animal that doesn't fit the environment might be obvious for an enemy listening in. You can also use minor illusion to show maps and images and diagrams and letters. You can use visual aids like a picture of an ally or someone you're searching for. You could create a miniature model of them in your hand or a statue. You could also forge documents, keeping in mind it's an illusion and stationary, but with the right setup it can be useful. A wanted poster in the right place at the right time can be very handy, or you can use it to create false evidence to implicate an enemy. Now there's a few benefits to consider with the minor illusion spell. So consider that illusions can affect multiple targets. Everyone is functionally looking at the same thing. It also takes an action to interact with the illusion, so it can force an enemy to waste action economy. The saving throw, as intelligence, it is typically one of the weaker saves for many creatures and characters. And one benefit, which may again be DM dependent, by the spell description you should be able to imitate someone's voice. So consider imitating an enemy leader's voice to throw out fake orders, or you could imitate the sound of a local priest or council member or mayor. The DM might require a deception or persuasion or performance check, or something that qualifies being able to imitate a specific voice versus a general voice. Now, as this is a cantrip, it is important to realize that there are some limitations to this spell as well. There are things it cannot do. So, there are no sensory effects to the spell. So you can't create smell, light, or complex sensations. Interacting with it also reveals that it is an illusion. Depending on the campaign or table, something that seems very out of place might be obvious as an illusion in a magic-rich environment. So some campaigns do different degrees of magic use. So as an example, sure, you can create the sound of a dragon roaring, but why is there a dragon coming from the basement of a village inn? It might seem obvious as an illusion. It's also important to consider that this is a cantrip and functionally free to cast. You won't be able to do as much with this spell as some of the more powerful illusion spells that cost spell slots, like Silent Image, Major Image, and the like. So trying to do too much with this spell can be an issue with your DM. So typically it's good to have a logical reason why your illusion should succeed at what you're trying to achieve. Also consider that your DM may view the illusion as either convincing, so it needs to be studied or investigated, or not convincing, so it doesn't need to be studied or investigated with an action. So for action economy purposes, one person can use their action to investigate it, learn that it's an illusion, and they could also use a free action to shout out that information to their allies. Now for discussion board topics on the internet. So from what I can find, there are two major controversies with minor illusion as a spell. The first stems from what you can actually get away with doing, and the second comes from metagaming as either a player or a DM in spending action economy to investigate the illusions in combat. The out-of-combat effectiveness of minor illusion doesn't seem to be as big of an issue when you're generally worried less about action economy. But during combat, every action, bonus action, movement can count pretty significantly. So some recommendations are having creatures react differently based on their own intelligence, class, or skill set to handle illusions. So for example, a wizard who has minor illusion in their own spellbook is much more likely to recognize the use of the spell, while an animal or a beast or a goblin minion with limited intelligence might be more easily fooled. You can also consider if you've repeatedly used the same illusion against the enemy. It might work better the first time than subsequent attempts. One of the other important limitations to consider is that with this spell, you can only create the image of an object. You cannot create a creature. So you can create a very lifelike statue of a creature, but there's absolutely no movement to the object. It's a static image. Best way to think about it is as if you were creating a convincing prop for a movie set, not an actual creature in the world. And last, as a reminder, minor illusion is just that. It's a minor illusion. It doesn't prevent movement, it's limited in size, and physically interacting with it reveals it as an illusion. Now, there are endless posts arguing about minor illusion as a spell and illusion spells in general. Some tables actively ban them, or they aren't able to find any middle ground between it being useless or way overpowered. So consider the functionality of the spell based on the spell level itself. It's a cantrip, so as a general rule, it should be roughly as powerful as other cantrips, and less powerful than illusion spells of a higher level. The last segment for this episode is fun fact information about the minor illusion spell. So, minor illusion was first added as a spell in the 2014 edition of the Player's Handbook for D&D 5e, and it hasn't really changed in between editions. The neat piece of information I found about the material component, which is a bit of fleece, apparently this is a nod to the phrase pulling the wool over someone's eyes, as in deceiving them with false information, which is very fitting for minor illusion, and many of the other illusion spells like Silent Image and Major Image also use a bit of fleece as the material component. And I looked into the origin of the phrase, which apparently is debated, but a widely accepted theory traces back to the 18th and 19th century fashion of wearing elaborate woolen powdered wigs, which could be referred to as just wool, so pulling the wool over someone's eyes effectively blinds them from what's happening. So I thought it was a very fitting material component. Well, that's it for this session of Roll for Insight. Thanks for listening, and thank you to all our supporters on patreon.com/rollforinsightpodcast. And we will see you next time.